welcome to this video. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Ruth and I want to talk today all about Carl Jung, the eminent, amazing psychologist, and all about his work with the shadow side. So this is something that's fascinated me as a counselling student for a long time, and I really have a lot of respect for Carl Jung's work. He was a fantastic, incredible psychologist who really married the scientific, very academic side of the genre to the idea of mysticism and spirituality. So this video, I want to do a really close-up look at the Disney film Moana and how that links to the shadow side that Carl Jung explores in his work. So the idea of Disney characters, Disney stories, fables, folklore, linking in with psychology and these core fundamental areas of psychology is something that's been explored a lot. Jordan Peterson explores these areas in some of his work, and so when I watched Moana recently, it really stood out to me just how powerful Carl Jung's idea of the shadow is in that story, and it really moved me. I mean, Moana is such an incredible film, the songs, the whole feeling of it, but the deeper ideas that run through that film are so incredibly powerful for us all and powerful for humanity in general. And so I'm really interested. I'm just going to have my notes here as well because I made a lot of notes whilst watching Moana, which is kind of a little bit geeky, but all good. So the idea that we have to first of all, in the words of Carl Jung, know that there is a hero and a villain in every story. And in our own inner story, there is a hero and a villain. There is a light and there is a shadow. And if we do not acknowledge the shadow, we force the shadow out, we cast it away, then it is going to have really strong effects on our life. So, for example, in Moana, the fact that Te Fiti gets turned into the other fire goddess who is called Te Kā. I was just checking that in my notes. So these names are quite detailed. So Te Fiti was this kind of like Mother Earth. She was very integrated. Everything was in balance and everything was blooming. And then there was this problem, there was this issue that turned her to the darkness. So there was something that happened in her experience which made her become Te Kā, who is this fire demon. And the idea that when something happens to us and cast shadows and we have trauma in our life that lives within inside of ourselves, then the idea that then that ripples out to everything. So we see in Moana the fact that there are all of this is going on, all of this darkness, and it is affecting the people who they want to stay safe, they want to stay in blissful ignorance in some ways, and they want to keep to their village, they want to keep Moana there, they never want to go beyond the reef. So that idea that something happens and we want to ignore it, we want to stay in our comfort zone, we don't want to acknowledge it. So we can do that for a certain period of time, as they did in Moana, but then there comes a point when we can't catch fish anymore and our plants start to die and we can't build relationships anymore, and there's all of these difficult things that are going on and we can try and ignore them. But as we see in Moana, in her own character, she really hears this whisper. It's described in a lot of the songs in the film as a whisper. So Moana hears this whisper, and it's really a call from her inner psyche to go beyond the reef. So the reef is turquoise, it's clear, it's very like aqua blue, which we all love. We all like to be in that. And then if you've ever gone and done some like deep water swimming, or like I did in Maui, where I went kayaking with the whales, you know, we leave those clear waters and we go out for a couple of miles and the water is dark, and that is the shadow. So in Moana, when she ventures out and she hears this whisper that she must go out into that shadowy water. She must explore it. It's the inner call of her really wanting to discover what's going on inside her, and to have that wisdom. And we see the grandma figure in the story as a wisdom keeper. So the idea that our ancestral heritage and our ancestors and our community can really give us that strength and that ability to be able to go into those darker waters and explore our shadow, if we are lucky enough to have someone like the grandma who is flying her freak flag and isn't ashamed of the darkness of the past that we see the father and the other villagers just don't want to talk about. And so the grandma figure is the one that spurs Moana on, and Moana finds this ability to listen to the whisper and to go forth and go beyond the reef. And she does that and gains that momentum from the support of that elder and from finding that in herself. So she goes deeper and deeper into the shadow, and like Carl Jung says, once we start to explore the shadow, there is much work to be done there. There are many parts of ourselves that we are going to see for the first time. So when she meets the character of Maui, who is this demigod who is beyond human life, I really see him as almost a part of Moana. So a little bit in like Life of Pi, the book and the film, where we can maybe use the interpretation that other characters and animals in that story are part of our inner psyche. So the idea that Maui is this divine, mystical, non-human part of Moana's adventure and part of what she needs to be able to go forward and to get to Te Kā and to put the heart back into Te Fiti, is a really beautiful idea. And they set sail on this voyage. Sorry, anyone that hasn't watched Moana, there's a lot of spoilers here. So they set forth together on this voyage, and it's a really interesting idea that it's not straightforward. They aren't just going to go and everything's going to go to plan. There is ego. So Maui has inside himself a lot of ego about his hair, and he's a demigod, and he is, doesn't care about the chicken and doesn't care about, the things that matter. But because Moana is willing and open and vulnerable and exploring different parts of herself, we begin to see that she inquires and she doesn't give up on Maui. She wants to know, what does this tattoo mean? And all about his life. And she discovers, because she gives him that time, they're one-to-one, they're on this boat together, she begins to learn that he, was abandoned. He has a lot of trauma in his past. He's hurting. That's why he gets angry. That's why he has the ego, because he's tried to give back and nothing was ever enough. And I think that in our own lives, we can sometimes feel that if we have been hurt or wronged in the past, we can want to make amends, we can want to please our parents, we can go to great lengths to make other people happy, but ultimately it never fills us up and we never feel like it's enough. And that's what's happening to Maui in the Moana story. And then as they get towards the end of that journey together, we see that Maui begins to soften and he feels heard and understood by Moana. And he begins to see that even though she doesn't have this kind of like godly status, that she is of value, and she's showing him her humanness, and her humanness is showing, her humanness is showing him his human side, and his godly side and divine and mystical side is showing Moana the inner power that she has. So we also have the support of the grandma and of the water and the elementals that come in all through the story, which is a really beautiful way of seeing how nature can support us as well. So, swimming and being with nature and having a great respect for the power of water, for the power of fire, for the power of the land and the food which grows and the ecosystem that sustains all of human life is really profound. And finally, when they get to that end point and there is this incredibly complex web of the idea that Moana has made this journey, and Maui and the ego has challenged her many, many times to leave and to go back, and through her reflections and her support and her ancestry and her strong belief in herself, that she is able to meet, I'm just going to check, what's it called again? She's able to meet Takar. Sorry about that, I always forget that word, Takar. She's able to meet this fire demon. And one of the most beautiful parts of that scene for me is when she holds up the Tafiti stone, the green stone that is so precious and such a key part of the narrative. She simply intuitively holds it up and is able to, as Takara is getting angrier and swirling, and we've all been there when we are hurt and we're in the shadow of our life and our psyche and it's just out of control, and she just reflects this beautiful reminder to Takar of who she really is and what she really is, and the reflection and just seeing that across that eye-to-eye reflection is a really poignant moment for me, because it reminded me of somebody being in the counselling room or somebody having psychotherapy and just having that other person to reflect back to them what they need in that moment, and the fact that it's so powerful that it brings Takar to a stop, and then Moana is able to part the waters and she is able to meet face to face with their shadow after all the journey, after all the seeking, after all the assimilation. She's able to meet with that shadow, and that's a key moment in all of our journeys to work with our shadow side. As Carl Jung always said, there is a journey to meeting the shadow, to acknowledging it, to being brave, to going past the reef into the darker waters and following that, and going beyond the ego, the Mauis in our minds, and having that opportunity to crumble. And then as we see Takar crumble and Tafiti is reborn in the image, she looks just like Moana, it's Moana. And it's such a beautiful thing to see her bloom and the greenery to be restored. And that's the inner journey that we can all go through with psychotherapy, with counselling, with this Jungian kind of philosophy on the shadow side. So the idea that it's an inner journey that ripples out and affects, so the grandma affects Moana, Moana affects Maui, Moana returns, affects the village. She is transforming the ecosystem, the very being of life on the outside, but also her inner life and her rich tapestry of who she is as a person, and how brave it is for us to go into that shadow. So that is my take on if Moana sat down and had a session with Carl Jung, they would be able to explore some of her rich ancestry and her connection to the elementals and the mysticism and the elements of herself that really has this responsibility and loves her family and her groundedness of her home, which they talk a lot about in the songs, but equally this want for a journey and this idea of meeting that shadow and getting to know herself, which can be a life's journey and a life's voyage across those rough terrains and those seas, but with our ancestry, with our grandma's wisdom, with our willingness to meet the ego and be in dialogue and to not push the shadow. Maui pushes the shadow away, pushes Takar, wants to battle with it. Moana opens up and she parts the seas and says, I see you, I love you. And she does that for Maui as well and breaks down the ego, which is beautiful to watch. So I am going to end it there because I could go on forever and ever, and maybe we should do more of these Disney psychoanalytical, psychological videos, because there is so much to be gleaned from these beyond the incredible songs and the tales that they tell us. There is so much deeper meaning, and just from watching Moana, I feel so much more connected to my grandma and how much she battled through so many difficult things in her life. She was born in like 1904. She lived all through that century until she was 96 and died in the 1990s. And I have so much of her wisdom within me, as you will with your ancestors, and that rich tapestry which makes us all up. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said, hopefully it didn't spoil Moana. If you've watched it, go and watch it again. I want to just go and watch it now after making this video and sing some of the songs. So enjoy finding out more about Carl Jung below. I'll post some links to his theory in more detail, and hopefully talk a lot more about Carl Jung in future videos as well, and working with that shadow. If you feel like you've got that shadow inside you, really kind of honouring it and doing what Moana does, giving it your love and telling it that it's okay. So also a little bit like internal family systems, I'll post a link to that video below. That system of therapy is very similar to Carl Jung's idea as well. So I'll post that below and you can look into it if you want to. And big Disney goodbyes, and I will see you next time for another video. Alright, thanks guys, bye!